The goal of life is not to live a life with zero stress. It's actually biologically impossible. You need a little bit of healthy stress. And so your brain and body are really good at managing short-term stress, a short burst of stress, and then you come back to baseline. But if you never come back to baseline, you start getting these unhealthy manifestations of stress.
That's Harvard stress expert, Dr. Aditi Nerurkar. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you like this conversation or any others you've heard, I have a favor to ask you. Consider leaving us a review so we can keep bringing you more conversations that you love. And if you don't know how to do that, here's how to leave a review. On Apple Podcasts, go to the Everyday Better page, scroll down to ratings and reviews, and click the number of stars you want to give us. Then, right below that, click Write a Review and add a note for our team. On Spotify, go to our page, click the 3 dots next to the settings wheel, and select Rate Show. We so appreciate your feedback, and as always, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can each flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. Welcome to our very first episode of 2025, and Happy New Year. I hope everyone got at least a little bit of time to rest, recharge, and reset over the holidays. Reset your focus, your goals, your mindset, really anything that you want to make changes to in 2025. Reset is kind of my personal buzzword for this year. As my husband and I are prepping to welcome our first baby into the world, I'm resetting all sorts of things. My mentality around work, for one, because I'll be taking maternity leave. So this is the first time I'm ever going to be a little more hands-off on the show. Also, the way I use social media, that's getting a hard reset because I want to be really present to my daughter during this time. And here at Everyday Better, we're kicking off 2025 with a month's worth of conversations dedicated to the reset. Each episode is going to offer you a powerful reset for each of the 4 pillars of well-being that we talk about on this show. That's mental, physical, work, and relational well-being. And we have an incredible guest lineup to talk about sleep, not just how to reset your sleep schedule, but your whole relationship to rest and what it means for you. Later, we'll explore what it means to reset our definitions of ambition and success in the context of work. Because in 2025, we're taking steps to prevent burnout, which often means doing less and putting up those boundaries that allow you to say no more often. And while we're talking about how to reset our relationship to work, let's also hit reset on how our work impacts our most important relationships. We all know how challenging it can be to leave work at the office, and the problem failing to do so can cause at home. So in 2025, we're learning how to nurture our relationships even in our busiest seasons. But first, we're going to reset our minds. We have to start there for anything else to work. And there's no one better to lead us into that journey than Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, author of the 5 Resets, Rewire Your Brain and Body for Less Stress and More Resilience. Aditi's a Harvard physician and an expert in stress and burnout. Before writing this book, she spent many years developing a roster of science-backed strategies to help her patients recover from, not just cope with, their stress. Stress is so common and so widespread that our baseline for normal isn't really so normal anymore. Aditi says that today, anywhere from 50 to 70% of adults in the U.S. are struggling with it. We're at a point where we can't just relax or take a day off if we want to feel better. Those are Band-Aids. And what we need is a hard reset for our minds and our bodies so we can meaningfully turn down the volume on our stress. And Aditi's figured out how we can do that simply, practically, and at zero cost, starting right now. Here's Aditi.
When you are feeling a sense of stress, you are living in your amygdala, which is this small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain. And by design, your amygdala is focused on your immediate survival and needs. So it is when you are feeling a sense of stress and that fight or flight response is going, you can't get out of your own way because you're just thinking about your immediate needs. To plan for a better future with less stress or less burnout or better mental health, all of these far-reaching things, your amygdala can't do that. That's the job of your prefrontal cortex, which is right here. If you put your hand on your forehead, it's the area right behind your forehead. And that prefrontal cortex is what manages things like strategic thinking, complex problem solving, future plans, organization, memory, things that usually when you're feeling less stressed, you're good at.
And
it's like
everything we
adulting.
need.
It's like modern day adulting.
We need. Yeah.
But when you're feeling a sense of stress, it's almost like the amygdala, that small almond-shaped structure, hijacks the prefrontal cortex. And so what, for me, with the 5 resets and everything I talk about, it's using science, right? Because as a doctor, I can't do anything but talk about science, and everything is couched in science, but it's about having various strategies and tools to get out of amygdala mode and back to your prefrontal cortex.
Okay, so I want to talk about the resets, but I really want to talk about stress first because I'm like, okay, even when you just said like amygdala versus prefrontal cortex, I'm like, okay, so does that mean only one can be on at a time? And how do I know, like, oh, I'm in my amygdala right now versus, all right, everything's going good. It's all on. Cylinders are firing in the prefrontal cortex.
So I like to describe it as a canary in the coal mine. So I'm not a historian, but historically, that phrase, canary in the coal mine, comes from a time when there were coal miners. They would go into the mines and they would bring a caged bird, a canary, with them. They'd go into the mines and that canary would start singing. And when the canary stopped singing, that was a sign for the miners to say, okay, hold on, we got to get out of here. The air is bad. Because left to their own devices, humans, we are very bad at knowing our limits, knowing when to say, okay, I've had enough and I need to take breaks, setting boundaries. And so often you just push past discomfort. And so we all have a canary within us. So my canary was a stampede of wild horses across my chest. For others, it's abdominal pain. For others still, maybe, low back pain. That's not to say that it's not real. These are very real things that are happening in your body. The first step is always, as a doctor, I have to say, is to go to your doctor. Make sure that there's nothing going on internally, because stress, in medical terms, we call it a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning everything else has to be ruled out for us as doctors to say, it's just stress.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But there's no such thing as just stress, because just stress can be debilitating, as it was for me, as it's been for millions of people. Because when you look at the data, anywhere from 50 to 70% of adults are struggling with stress and burnout. In one study, up to 90% of people in the UK were struggling. And so if you feel this way, you are not alone. It is not your fault. And we can talk a little bit about, the shame and blame and why we feel like it is, oh my God, it's my fault. It's only happening to me.
I'm alone.
I'm alone.
Yeah. It's hard at first to be like, oh, I'm actually not alone, because in the moment you're feeling like my canaries in the coal mine I get really tight in my chest and it feels like a rock or something that's like really tight right here or in my back, or I have intrusive thoughts. And so that was so hard for me. Like I recently did an episode on my intrusive thoughts and anxiety because I realized that I hadn't been talking about it. And even though I thought I'd accepted it, I still needed to get it out there because I heard about intrusive thoughts from someone else who shared, and I was like, oh my God, this is a thing and I'm not crazy. And so being able to share that, and like I'm doing this now in service of anybody who's going, oh, well, she didn't call mine out. I'm like, maybe yours is one of these and maybe it's something totally different, but like the conversations should happen more and we just don't do it. And I think it's such a travesty for people who are experiencing this that never get to the point where they hear a person say, no, me too.
And we're all struggling. I mean, look, we have a lot of work to do, but it has
totally
started.
Changed. Yeah.
Self-care, really talking about boundaries, talking about burnout and stress. When I went through my own debilitating stress struggle, these words were not part of anyone's lexicon. And it wasn't even that long ago, know?
Right.
It was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a medical student. And within the first few months of medical school, we were all sitting in an auditorium, all the students. And one of the professors came in front of us and was just talking about, introduction to your life as a doctor and what to expect. And it's such a great honor to become a physician, et cetera, et cetera. And that doctor, I'll never forget, the professor said, and just remember one thing, what you are going to go through, it is so difficult. But remember, pressure makes diamonds.
Right.
And that was my mantra. I was like, got it. Pressure makes diamonds. Roger that.
I got the tattoo.
Yeah. I was like, I'm ready. So all throughout my medical training, anytime, we worked 80 hours a week, saw death and dying on a daily basis, things that in my opinion, no mere mortal should see. Terrible, horrible things. And anytime it got bad, I'd say to myself, it's okay. Pressure makes diamonds. I'm a diamond in the making. And then my diamond cracked.
Yeah.
And that's when it really was a reckoning for me, because up until that point, I was a senior resident in the cardiac ICU. I was taking care of everyone else's hearts, not really thinking about my own. I felt that stampede of wild horses after a 30-hour call. I hadn't eaten well. I hadn't slept well, but it was just part and parcel of my medical training. And I felt that sensation. It was terrifying. I sat down. The nurse I was working with gave me some orange juice, and then this feeling subsided in seconds. But that feeling followed me night after night for several weeks until I finally went to see a doctor. That doctor did the full medical workup, checked blood for, my thyroid, electrolytes, anemia, did a bunch of heart tests, and everything checked out fine. And so she said, big reassuring smile, it's just stress. Just try to relax. We've all been there. Medical training is hard.
Yeah.
So just stress. I did all the things. I went to movies with friends, went out with my girlfriends, took vacations, got massages, retail therapy. You name it, I tried it. Nothing worked. Only when I put my scientist hat on to say, what is stress? How is it affecting the brain and the body? Did I find my way out of stress? And so I think when people, your listeners might say, yeah, I've been taking baths and getting massages and, Netflix and chill, and nothing seems to work. It's because all of these are Band-Aids and they're wonderful in the moment.
Right.
But you can't rely on these to actually manage and reset your stress and manage your burnout simply because they're not targeting the biology of stress.
Right. So talk to me about what's happening in our brains and in our bodies when we experience stress. And I feel like we still have to say this, like the brain and the body are connected. So
the brain and the body
it's
are
one
connected.
system. So what's going on then? I know the amygdala is part of this, but what else is happening?
So the brain and the body are connected. There's lots of data. It sounds woo-woo, but in fact, there's lots of science to show that in fact, the brain and the body are inextricably linked in constant communication, and what's good for your body is good for your brain and vice versa. So your stress mechanism, the part of your brain, it's the amygdala, and it is responsible for your fight or flight response. And it's called fight or flight because evolutionarily, when we were all cave people, we would be in the forest and you would see a tiger. And it's either you're going to fight the tiger or you're going to run away from the tiger. And there's all sorts of things that happen in your body when that happens. Your pupils dilate so you can see better. Your blood rushes to your vital organs like your heart and your lungs. Your heart starts beating quicker.
Hence your stampede.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your heart starts beating quicker because your body is trying to pump more blood to your muscles in case you have to run away. So you feel those palpitations or that stampede. And that response, that fight or flight response, is essentially unchanged from our cave person days. But now we are no longer living in forests. We aren't cave dwellers. We're not facing tigers head on like in this same way acutely. But now these are metaphorical tigers, bills, relationship
late
problems,
to the train or
late to the train or a big looming deadline.
Yeah.
And so your amygdala stays on in the background. And so it's shifted now from acute stress to chronic stress. You can have baseline chronic stress and then on top of that acute stress, of course, which is what most of us live with. But really, there's no time when you just have no stress because these tigers are all around us. And your brain doesn't really know the difference between truly a tiger in the forest, which is why you have all of these symptoms, or a looming deadline. And so the goal of a lot of these things that I like to do with patients or with my audiences or in the 5 resets is to switch you from that amygdala, sympathetic mode, fight or flight, back to where you are feeling calm and grounded, governed by your prefrontal cortex.
So when we think about stress, is it more recent that we are experiencing stress? And what are the things that are happening now that maybe weren't happening before that are creating environments or like internal environments of stress for people?
Human beings, we are designed to handle stress, short bursts of stress, but it's very different now. In 2025, what we're seeing now is that there's no respite. And a lot of that has to do with many factors. So, for example, over the past several years, we've lived through a pandemic. In the US, we had a racial reckoning. Around the world, we've had lots of climate emergencies. We have had lots of humanitarian crises all over the world. And because we are informed citizens, we know about them in real time, and that has an influence on your brain. And your brain does not know the difference between something happening in your living room or something happening thousands of miles away, because we are all hyper-connected through technology. We have to, of course, stay informed in all aspects of life, all around the world. We need to know what's going on. But you do need to create some boundaries to protect your mental health. And it can't be at the expense of your mental health. Because when you understand that your brain, particularly that amygdala, doesn't really understand the geographic difference between something happening in your hometown or down the street or something happening thousands of miles away, that sense of hypervigilance, that's what happens to me now.
And can hypervigilance be, I consider myself these days to be hypervigilant, and or it's a signal of being anxious.
Yes.
But it's like I'll be walking around our neighborhood with our dogs and I'm looking everywhere. I know exactly what's happening. I notice things. My husband's always like, you notice everything. And I'm like, yeah, but it's because I'm literally like ready to watch anything that's going on. My eyes are darting.
Yeah, you're on high alert.
Yeah. Okay.
It's that amygdala response. For me, I will be working and someone will come into the room, my office, and I will jump. I never used to do that.
Yep.
I just used to look up from my computer and say, hey,
right.
Oh, who is that? And now it's like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right. So I never knew about this part about the geography. Like this is newer for me, where I'm like, wait a second, we watch the news a lot. And I feel like it's important to be informed, as we talked about. But it's like, I assumed that I knew because, like, conceptually, I know that Europe is 7 hours away from me, or that, the Middle East is on the other side. It's like I know how to mentally think that, but I didn't realize that my amygdala didn't.
And don't you feel the difference? I mean, again, the data has shown that when people consume graphic images, graphic content, it makes you want to consume more because you feel a greater sense of hypervigilance. Your stress response is keyed up even more. And it's a way for you to feel safe. So in fact, it is what I call your primal urge to scroll. Now, if your amygdala is triggered when you're looking at headlines, when you're looking at all sorts of stuff, images, videos, headlines, reading things, if it is triggered, then what happens is that it starts working as it should, trying to keep you safe. And so you scroll some more. And it makes you feel worse, but you can't stop.
Yes.
Why? It is your primal urge to scroll. You are scanning for danger. So when you are scrolling and you can't stop, instead of berating yourself, saying, oh, I can't believe I did that, understand that it is your biology doing exactly what it's meant to do.
So I want to get into the 5 resets, but first I want to ask you this. Like, all right, so we look at the 5 resets. They're pretty simple, right? You're not asking us to do anything wild. Why don't we already do this? Why do we work against ourselves? I'm like, all of these things seem so simple, and yet.
I love this question. A lot of it is by design, because when you are living in amygdala mode and you're feeling a sense of stress, you can't get out of your own way. It's not you, it's your biology. You're thinking about your immediate needs, just trying to make it through the day, make it through the hour sometimes. And so thinking about, this Friday, I'm going to do this for my mental health. It's not even on your radar. Most of us living in 2025, you have all of the information at your fingertips. It is not a gap in knowledge or information. It is typically a gap in action. Because when you are feeling a sense of stress, where you are in the moment and where you would like to be feels like the Grand Canyon.
Worlds away. Yep.
It's like a chasm. You can't cross it because it just feels so far away and it feels like it's out of reach. And so the work that I do is to close that gap so it doesn't feel far away. It feels within reach. It takes time. Understand that to create any sort of brain pathway, it takes about 8 weeks. And so when you are trying something new, like in the 5 resets, if you say, I'm going to try, a couple of these strategies, by week 2 or 3, you might be feeling better. By week 4, you might fall off instead of saying, forget it. It didn't work. I wasn't able to keep going. You go back. You just get back on and you keep going, because falling off, getting back on, falling off, getting back on. That's how your brain creates pathways.
Yeah, you're talking about, like, just to be clear for everybody, you're talking about neural pathways that
Yes,
are created in the brain That we're basically like, I've
You're
heard
making
it referenced as a
connections.
ski slope. So like we want to create a new ski slope, and that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Okay. And you can do this at any age too, right? Because I know
Any
neuroplasticity has
age.
been like, it used to be, it's over at a certain point.
No,
But yeah.
that's
Okay.
the fascinating thing. I've had patients who've been 85 and 88 reset their stress by using these strategies
Wow.
because your brain is a muscle, just like your biceps. So you talk about this fancy word you introduced, neuroplasticity, which simply means that you can train your brain the same way you can train your biceps. So we know that muscle, you can train it, right? When you think about your biceps, if you go to the gym and you start lifting weights, you start doing different things, your muscles will get stronger because of the muscle fibers, etc. Your brain is the same. Your brain is a muscle.
Coming up, 5 things you can do tomorrow to get out of your amygdala and into your prefrontal cortex. We'll be back in just a few moments. And we're back with Harvard stress expert, Dr. Aditi Nerurkar. All right, let's do the 5 resets. Tell me where we start.
Yeah. So the first reset is get clear on what matters most. And what this is the first step. It helps you create a roadmap. It gets you out of amygdala mode back to your prefrontal cortex. And so the first step is to create your MOST goal. So MOST is an acronym. M stands for motivating. O, objective. S, small. And T, timely. Create some form of a MOST goal. Something that you can achieve in 2 to 3 months' time. It can be professional, it can be personal. Examples include, I want to have more energy so I can look for a new job. Or I want to sleep better and wake up feeling rested. Whatever it is that motivates you, something objective that you can measure, something small that you can achieve in 2 to 3 months, and timely that feels now, current. You have a sense of urgency about it. And then the next step in this reset is to create a backwards plan. And all that is, it's a 1-page description. At the top, you're going to write your MOST goal. At the bottom, you're going to write start. And right below that, you're going to write down the step that you need to do right before you achieve your MOST goal. Then what's that step below that you need to achieve? And just go down the page. It doesn't have to be a certain number of steps. It can be 5 steps. It can be 15, 20 steps. Just keep going down that page until you get to today, the start. And so that's the first step, and that's the way you get out of amygdala mode into your prefrontal cortex. The MOST goal kind of becomes like your North Star of like, this is why I want to do this work. The key when you're doing something with trying a new habit is to try to do it every day. So keep it really small. Why? Because you want to avoid decision fatigue. Aim to do something every single day because it avoids decision fatigue. When you want to start exercising, let's say, you say, I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week, and I'm going to go for an hour, and I'm going to go to this class. And so Monday comes around, you're like, oh, I didn't make it. I had something come up at work. Tuesday, something with your kids, something's going on at home. Wednesday, something back at work, a deadline. And then it's Saturday, and you've gone 0 times or maybe 1 time. And then you berate yourself.
Right, you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. The inner critic comes out. Instead, just a short 5-minute walk every single day. This is not about physical fitness. This is the promise of mental fitness. Just like we talked about neuroplasticity, your brain responds to things that you do. And when you do better, you feel better. And so when you are engaging in a short 5-minute walk for your stress every day, it actually has an impact on your brain. Over time, when you build a habit of exercise, remember it takes 8 weeks, then you can say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do all these things. But if you start off saying, I'm going to do all those things, you're going to do 0.
Yep.
We've all been there.
Okay, so before we move to 2, I want to know, is there a relationship? Well, I'm not going to spend all this time asking it in a big way. How many times have we made lists like these and not done anything or procrastinated on things? Like, is there a relationship between procrastination and, I don't want to say is there, but
there is.
What do we do about the fact, like, I am a lifelong procrastinator. I have all sorts of lists. Like, I love this work. And probably half of them I haven't touched. So, like, what do I do to actually feel like I'm getting into action instead of making these lists and letting myself down?
Ooh, what a good question. Follow the rule of 2. So the rule of 2 is how your brain makes change happen. This is why New Year's resolutions fail. Because we often will say, I'm going to do 15 or 20 things. And then by, February 1st, you're like, can't do anything. I'm done. And when you follow the rule of two, so what is the rule of two? Your brain can only sustain 2 new changes at a time. Anything more in your system is overloaded. So think back to early 2020. During the pandemic, we were all on lockdown. I know we don't want to go there, but if you were like me, you wanted to learn a new language, play a musical instrument, maybe
read every book,
learn how to bake. I wanted to build a farmhouse table from scratch.
I love that.
And now it is a wonder if you shower once a day and eat some vegetables. That's a rule of two in action. You cannot sustain huge lifestyle overhauls during periods of stress because positive change is a stress on your brain. Your brain needs a little bit of time to adapt to any change, be it positive or negative. So all of the 15 strategies, pick 2. Do these 2 things for 8 weeks. Then after those 8 weeks, they become folded into your life and a part of your life, add 2 more and keep going. It's the rule of 2.
Got it. Okay. All right. So 2, what's the next one?
The second reset, find your quiet in a noisy world. This is all about digital boundaries. We talked a lot about your primal urge to scroll. And so how do you decrease your reliance on your devices? We know the data shows that it's not about abstinence. No one wants you to become a digital monk. It's about decreasing your reliance on your devices that actually makes a measurable difference and an improvement to your mental health and well-being. And so there's various strategies in this particular reset about reconsidering your relationship with your devices. We have relationships in every single area of your life. You have boundaries. You have boundaries with your partner, your children, your colleagues, your friends, and yet you have a porous boundary and likely no boundary when it comes to the relationship you have with your digital device. So there's some specific things that I mentioned. One is keep your phone off your nightstand so you're not scrolling. Remember, scrolling is there's no such thing as mindless scrolling. It has a direct influence on your brain, on the circuitry of your brain, and the stress cascade or the fight or flight response. The other one I like to do a lot, particularly at night, it's kind of a game changer, is grayscale. And so simply what that means is switching your phone off of color mode to black and white mode. And what this does is it's been shown to have demonstrated effects on decreasing your screen time and making scrolling less enticing and less, for lack of a better word, addictive. It's particularly important for something called revenge bedtime procrastination. So many of us, we all work so hard during the day. And at the end of the day, when, if you're a parent, your kids are asleep, or if you're not a parent, you've finally wrapped up all your responsibilities, like the to-do list is checked off and you sit on that couch. It's 8:30 or 9 or 10 or whatever that time is. And you finally have some me time and you have every intention of going to bed early. And then before you know it, you're scrolling and it's 12 o'clock or 1 a.m. And you're like, what happened? What did I even do? It's revenge bedtime procrastination. So what I typically do is I grayscale my phone at the end of the day when I want to scroll a little bit to decompress, but I can't be on until midnight. And, just like 20 minutes and I get bored. That's the point of grayscale.
Right.
And so that is that second reset.
Okay, so reset number 3, syncing your brain and your body.
The third reset is about the mind-body connection, tapping into the mind-body connection. We talked about the breath, right? What's fascinating is your breath is the only physiological mechanism that is under voluntary and involuntary control. So your heartbeat can't do that. Your brain waves can't do that. Your digestion can't do that. There is nothing in your body that can do that can switch between being voluntary, meaning you and I can sit here together and do a breathing exercise and you can do certain things with your breath. And then when you're not thinking about your breathing, it's going on in the background. So the sympathetic system, fight or flight, when you are in that mode with the amygdala, you're breathing in your chest. It's called thoracic breathing, quick, rapid breathing. Your heart's beating, your lungs, because your body is in fight or flight mode. You're either going to fight the tiger or flee from the tiger. Now, on the other hand, when you are in parasympathetic mode, often what you do is you drop down into belly breathing. Your belly rises and falls. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. And what you can do is you can actively tap into your mind-body connection by focusing on diaphragmatic breathing or deep belly breathing. And so that power of your breath to be the gateway to really manage your stress and burnout is really a gold mine. And that's what this reset is about.
Do you have a favorite breath?
I love doing stop, breathe, be. It's one of my favorite techniques. And it's a 3-second brain reset. We can do it together. And so what you're going to do is you're going to stop. So we're going to stop talking. We're going to stop moving. Breathe. Take a deep breath in and out. And you're just going to be. Get grounded in the here and the now. Feel your body as it sits in the chair, your feet on the floor. If you're taking a walk and listening to this, think about your feet as you're walking and your body moving through space. So the first time I learned Stop, Breathe, Be, it was the doorknob before I entered a patient room. So I would knock on the door and I would say, Stop, Breathe, Be. I would say it under my breath. Then I would turn the doorknob and go into that patient room. Now I use Stop, Breathe, Be before I hit join Zoom. I use it during school drop-off because to think, okay, do I have everything that I need? Backpacks, lunches, hats, scarves, gloves, etc. I use it all the time. It's a really important thing to do during times of transition. I used Stop, Breathe, Be before you and I started talking here today. You didn't know I was doing it, but it takes 3 seconds.
I feel better just having done it with you just now. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, because it taps into your mind-body connection, gets you out of that anxious what-if thinking and back to what is. And over time, it can influence your mind-body connection to help reset your stress and burnout.
Oof. All right, so what's 4?
This particular one, Come Up for Air, is about creating space in your day to prioritize your mental health and decrease your stress and burnout. Earlier in our conversation, we talked about how you can't jet off to Bali. You have a lot of stress. You want to just check out 6 months surf holiday. Bali, sign me up for that life. Not happening. So how can you create some spaciousness in your day in the midst of your complicated, messy, overscheduled life? And why do these breaks even matter? The science shows that brain breaks are important as a way to reset your stress. They have done brain scans to show that, 4 10-minute breaks throughout the day can have a demonstrated effect on your brain, decreasing stress, improving engagement and attention, memory, and cognition. Even something as short as 10 seconds can make a difference. Some of the strategies I talk about is monotasking. When we are multitasking, it's a myth. There's no such thing as multitasking. In fact, it is a scientific misnomer. Multitasking, it's task switching. You're doing 2 separate things at the same time.
Right.
And so I talk a lot about this idea of monotasking and how do you bring monotasking into your everyday life when you're a working person in the modern world in 2025, right? It's like, you want me to do one thing at a time? I often, when I suggest monotasking, people cross their arms and are like,
okay, yeah, correct.
Like,
in what world?
Yeah. But there is a way that you can monotask rather than multitask. And why do you want, multitasking is bad for the brain. It actually weakens your productivity. It decreases your ability to solve complex problems. And so you have to start monotasking. And you start small, 5 or 10 minutes. I learned to monotask when I was a medical resident. I had to consume large amounts of information in medical school. So how do I keep it up and how do I retain all of that information? I started monotasking. So I would take 5, 10 minutes, went up to 15 minutes. Now I can do 50 minutes of monotasking and then I take a break, but you have to take a break. What do we usually do when we take breaks? You scroll, right? Like you take a break between meetings and you'll quickly scroll. You'll scroll your headlines, you'll scroll social media, you'll quickly look at email. Instead, make your breaks a little bit intentional. So get up and do some stretching. You can do Stop, Breathe, Be if you want. There's lots of breathing exercises in the 5 resets to really honor your breaks so that your brain can then be recharged to then go forward with that next block of time.
Okay, so monotasking, this might sound obvious, is just, okay, I'm going to read the book. I'm just going to read my book. I'm not going to answer text messages or whatever else. I'm going to write the paper. I'm just going to focus on writing is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
So let's say you have 4 tasks to complete for your workday. And what would you typically do? You do all 4 at the same time. And then you would compromise your prefrontal cortex. Instead, focus on task 1 for 10, 15 minutes. If you can go 20 minutes, great. Then take a short break. Then come back, focus on task 2, take a short break, then task 3 and task 4. So at the end of that time period, you have made headway on every single one of those tasks without compromising your prefrontal cortex or weakening your productivity.
Okay, so the 5th reset is bring your best self forward. Let's talk about that.
So bring your best self forward. It's the culmination. So by now, at the 5th reset, you've likely gotten out of the amygdala mode and you're back into the prefrontal cortex because the prefrontal cortex is focused on the future. And so there's various strategies. One strategy that is really helpful, that might be very helpful right now as this episode is launching, is something called expressive writing, what I call therapeutic writing. It's developed by James Pennebaker. He is at Vanderbilt University, I believe. And what it is, it's 20 to 25 minutes for 4 consecutive days. You write freehand about something that has been challenging to you. You can do anything, things that are like really keeping you up at night that are happening, whether it be in your personal life or your work life or current events. And for 4 consecutive days, you set a timer and you just write freehand. So you get a pen or a pencil and you get a piece of paper and you just go to town. You write every emotion that you have. On day 2 or day 3, you might notice an uptick of negative emotions. And by day 4, you've kind of like worked it out. The reason expressive writing is so important is because it is a way for you to reframe that conversation, that inner monologue. And the science, Leah, on therapeutic writing is fascinating. Hundreds of studies, if not thousands. Therapeutic writing has been shown to benefit anxiety, depression, insomnia, mood disorders, your GPA if you're a student, decrease hospital readmissions and visits to the ER. I mean, real measurable changes.
Why?
We don't really know. One of the hallmarks of science is that can these results be reproduced?
Right.
And it has been reproduced in various populations, in different ages and genders and occupations and countries. It is fascinating. So if you are struggling with something, whatever it may be, and you're trying to work it out, instead put it on paper and just write it out.
Okay, so I have 3 questions, just so you know. Why are you doing what you're doing?
I'm doing what I'm doing. A lot of the reason is because I was a stressed patient looking for answers. And so when I found my way out of my stress struggle, I vowed to become the doctor I needed during that difficult time. So it's very personal for me. Another reason I'm doing this, a lot of reasons, I love this question, is just because I want to really dismantle the shame and the blame and the taboo around stress, burnout, and mental health. I mean, based on the data I shared with you, Leah, 7 out of 10 people are struggling. So if 21 out of 30 people are struggling, this is the human condition.
Right.
And so for me to do this work with the 5 resets, I shared that doctors are typically, we're socialized to play small. So even sharing my personal story about stress and burnout was not something I really ever wanted to do. But I knew that it would help people connect with the work because I went through it myself, right? And I think for me, I went into medicine because I really very much believe in the power of the human story. And so I just think it's important to talk about because only through us talking about it can we truly lead healthier, happier lives. And I also believe because of my decades of being a doctor that we all have the power to make change happen in our lives.
So would you say if I asked you, what's the one thing we all need to understand or know about stress, would you say that it's universal or would you say something else?
If there's one thing to take away from our conversation about stress, it's that I would say give yourself a lot of grace and self-compassion. Understand that self-compassion actually has an impact on your stress. It decreases the volume of your amygdala. It has a direct influence on your amygdala. And so be kinder than necessary, both to yourself and others, because everyone is facing a hard battle.
What does self-compassion sound like?
I think self-compassion to me, what a great question. I just think it's being gentle with yourself and honoring your boundaries and saying, I'm going to rest now. And also having self-compassion in creating boundaries because boundary setting is very difficult. It's something that, I am less of a people pleaser now, but I grew up, I'm sure you too, very much a people pleaser. And so understanding boundaries, honoring my own boundaries, difficult.
Yes.
But a work in progress.
Yes, 100%.
And now that you are soon to become a new mother, that conversation about boundaries is going to be
completely
all the more important, very different.
Yep. Yeah. I've become very aware of how important it has been to me historically to make other people happy.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, they have to be happy with me and with all of my actions. So it's like, God, if I'm pleasing everyone, when am I just getting to be myself and recognize that people won't be happy with me all the time. And that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me. Better humans are
kinder to themselves and others. But I actually don't know if better, because I genuinely believe there's a decency in the human spirit. I've seen it with thousands of my patients. And so I don't know about that word better,
So
but I would
maybe it's
say
all humans are, like in
all
the future.
I think all humans have the capacity to have a sense of kindness for themselves and others, though we might not always see it.
Better work is, or I could say all work has the capacity to
Have greater boundaries and honor the full person, whether it be someone who is a worker, but also very much understand that people come to work with various roles and really honoring those roles as well.
A better world has the capacity to.
Oh, what a great question. I have chills. To heal us individually and collectively, because we do need a lot of healing right now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. This was great.
Thank you for having me.
I love
can't
it.
wait. Maybe the next time I see you, you'll be a mama.
I will probably be a mother. Yep. That was Harvard stress expert Dr. Aditi Nerurkar. If you like this conversation, text it to the first person who comes to mind. It might be just what they needed to hear. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gudron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. Tim Boland mixed our show. Andres Cardona is our video producer. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Enrique Montalvo is our executive producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.